spooky friends. Welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And today we have very differing topics for you.
We do indeed. Actually, I have no idea what you're covering. You've told me like 3 times already today. I think it's something with spiders.
No, not even. You're stupid. I hate you.
Robin, what are you going to be covering this week?
So I'm going to be covering an Angel of Death.
I mixed it up with Black Widow.
You're so stupid.
I'm glad I left up my Scarlett Johansson joke. So Angel of Death as in a nurse who kills their patients, correct?
Yeah.
Right on. I am going to be covering a haunted castle. So they're not that different, but yeah, they're pretty stinking different. But I'm pretty excited about mine. So should I just jump into it?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going first, obviously. And this week I had a few different ideas of what I wanted to cover, but there was one topic that was texted to me by a friend. I actually got like 3 or 4 topics sent to me from either spooky friends or people I know. And this one I found so intriguing I just had to cover it. So shout out to my friend Tim. He is my best friend, my brother from another mother. We've been best friends since we were 7 years old, and he texted me this topic, and I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. So without further ado, I present to you, spooky friends, Houska Castle.
Cool.
So, I love me some haunted castles. I think they're super fun, and this one definitely falls into the category of haunted and paranormal. This story takes place in the Czech Republic, just 30 miles north of Prague. The story itself starts out in the second half of the 1200s. Y'all remember the second half of the 1200s, right? The 7th, 8th, and 9th Crusades took place.
There were 9 of them?
I think there were more, actually, but those ones took place
shit?
specifically between 1250 and 1300. I'm pretty sure the 7th Crusade bled in from the first half of the 1200s, Jesus.
Stop shoving your religion down our throats, God.
And then the 10th Crusade, I'm pretty sure, was in the 1300s. Doesn't matter. 7, 8, and 9, those took place. Those were not great. The Mongols, of course, launched their first invasion of Japan in 1274. We all know that. It did not work out. And of course, who can forget the First War of Scottish Independence, which began in 1296, the very end of that century. Side note, yes, that was the War of Scottish Independence that had William Wallace in it. So
I don't know what...
It's Braveheart.
Okay.
Anyone who knows anything about wars of Scottish independence that aren't history majors, it's typically simply because they saw the movie Braveheart.
Is it about Outlander?
I hate you so much. I don't know. I only know that show. Every time I walk in on you watching that show, there's a rape going on, and I'm like, I'm not watching this fucking show with you. So, anyways, at some point during the second half of that century, something kind of weird was happening out in the Czech Republic. A mountain ridge in the area started to develop what we know as a sinkhole. Kind of. Like, you've seen those videos.
Ridge?
Yeah, you've seen those videos of, like, sinkholes appearing nowadays. Like, just random roads or houses being destroyed because the ground just, like, gives out and falls away. It's always super crazy to see, and that's kind of what happened here, except there was no road or house. It was just wilderness that suddenly started to collapse away on this hilltop that's in this mountainous range. So, it was obviously pretty weird, because the hole just seemed to go on and on. And the wilderness is just like the perfect place for a bottomless pit. It's mountainous, it's forested, there's swamps around. That's like 3 out of the 5 mana pools from Magic the Gathering right out of the bat. So that's a really hard deck to build, just saying. And to the people of the region...
I haven't played Magic.
Tricolor decks are a pain in the balls. I never recommend them. Anyways, to the people of the region, there was suddenly a bottomless pit that just randomly appeared in the mountainside. That's sincerely what happened, and that's how it felt. So naturally, people were freaked the fuck out. It's a giant hole that just appeared out of nowhere. Side note, this hole does actually exist. It's not bullshit. I am not sure how deep it is, as it is said to have never, quote-unquote, been really measured, although attempts to measure it supposedly did take place, and we will get to those. During this side note, I would also like to give our disclaimer that this could all be bullshit. That said, the place and the hole does exist, so there's that. It's a giant hole in the middle of nowhere, and by giant, I really mean deep. It's not like I was gonna say the roundest hole. It's not the widest hole, but it's definitely one of the deepest.
Is it a round hole?
It is a round hole.
Okay.
But it apparently doesn't have a bottom, so giant hole, middle of nowhere, no big deal, right? Well, according to the residents of the area, after the hole appeared, they started to hear creatures roaming the countryside at night. Creatures that were not indigenous to the area and sounds that they were not familiar with. According to the residents, it was like growling, howling, and all manner of terrifying noise began to emanate from the forested mountainside. Folks claim to have spotted these creatures and claimed that they were just beings of darkness, basically, seeming to be half human and half beast with glowing red eyes.
Sounds like what they had on their hands was a supermassive black hole.
I hate you so much. We could cover supermassive black holes one day. Those are kind of scary, I guess. But I hate you. Side note, I could only find a few websites that claim that their eyes were red. So not everyone confirms that their eyes were red, but pretty much all the websites called them demonic beasts or something of that nature. Some folks describe the creatures as large as a man, so they're about the same size as a human being, and they were seen in the sky as well, so they could fly, and they had black, leathery wings. Of course, they could just be seeing giant fucking bats, but I'm not sure if that really makes anyone feel any better, because bats, when they fly around, are kind of terrifying at night.
Mothman.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of Mothmen flying around. This place really feels like, when I was reading the things that happened and the creatures that people were seeing, it felt like it was straight out of the Castlevania series on Netflix.
Oh, yeah?
Like, I was totally picturing those creatures. So naturally, folks put 2 and 2 together and realized...
It equals 4.
Yeah, exactly. Story over. Good job, Robin. So glad you engineered the shit out of that. They realized the pit showed up, and then these demonic creatures showed up, and they began to think that it wasn't just an ordinary sinkhole that seemingly had no bottom. They believed it was an actual gateway to hell, or the underworld that just appeared.
It seems like a lot of things back in that time period just got labeled like this is a pathway to hell. Because
a lot of
it just
things
goes
that were
far underground.
Just unexplainable were like treated as if they were demonic in some way, shape, or form, or evil. But I gotta say, like, a hole with no bottom just opening up is pretty creepy. And then a bunch of people, either they were in a panic and they thought they were seeing these things, or they were seeing things that just were bizarre, or it's like, yeah, they were seeing straight up fucking demons. Like, they sincerely thought it was a gateway to hell. So the sightings started to get worse and worse, and the creatures started to be seen during the day. And you know, shit is getting really bad when paranormal activity starts happening in the daytime. Like in horror movies,
yeah,
like the Paranormal Activities or any of the Conjuring series / Annabelle, when haunting stuff starts happening during the day, it's like, it's definitely gotten worse.
Oh, yeah. In Annabelle, when
the nun,
creation, when the nun pushes the wheelchair down the hill or whatever.
Yeah, that part's super scary.
So scary.
So these creatures started coming out during the day, and they were killing the livestock in the area. So they weren't just causing a panic, but they were causing serious repercussions for people because they are losing things that are their livelihoods, things that feed them and clothe them.
So they don't know that it's an actual creature. They think it's these weird things that they're seeing. They don't know if it's like a wolf.
No, they're saying that these random creatures, these horrible, like, nightmare creatures were showing up in the villages at this point during the daytime and killing off the things that were left outside.
Wow.
Because everyone was hiding inside. Again, I already said that this could all be bullshit. So the powers that be, the people in charge, were like, yo, dog, we hear there's a gateway to hell that opened up on the mountainside. We should probably try and do something about that. And I was actually able to find a reference to this legend from a manuscript that was published in 1541 that states the locals, along with the powers that be who were in charge, decided to try and fill the pit. So they brought all these rocks to the pit, and they figured they were just going to dump it in there, and eventually the hole was going to get filled up. And the first thing they noticed when they started dumping rocks in is they could hear them falling, but they could not hear them hitting the bottom. And that kind of bothered them, but they figured they would bring enough so that they could fill this hole.
So the thing with a lot of these sinkholes is that it's rushing water underneath that's eating away at the earth. And so, I mean, technically, I guess if they're hearing the rocks fall and there's no bottom, it's because they're just getting washed away with whatever water's going on down there.
They're not saying they could hear water. Also, I would like to point out, what we're getting to is that the site of this castle is not near a water source, which is one of the more bizarre things that people say, like, why would you build a castle there? But we're going to keep going, okay? So they're pouring all these rocks in, it's not filling up, and they keep bringing more and more rocks to the hillside, and when they're finally like, we don't have any more rocks, the hole had swallowed all they had to give, and with each load they dumped into it.
Oh my god, stop it.
What are you doing? I'm trying to read my script here.
No, because I know you're going in a sexual
I am really not.
Direction.
They still couldn't hear anything hitting the bottom, and they were out of rocks. So the ruler at the time, named Ottokar II of Bohemia, needed an administration center at that time so they could manage the royal estates of the area. There are no royal estates in this area, but I guess when he heard about the hole to hell, he was like, oh shit, 2 birds, 1 stone. And what's funny is skeptics of the site today state that the castle was built purely for administration purposes, and it just made sense to put it there because it was like in the middle of all of these estates.
All right.
What's really interesting, and what I already spoke about, is that there are a bunch of folks who talk about the fact that this castle was built nowhere near a water source. So it's kind of funny to me because there's skeptics of both sides. There's people that are skeptical of the reason the castle was built, thinking it must be built because of some dark forces, and then people that are like, it's all a bunch of bullshit, but it was put there because they just, they needed a place for pencil pushers to push pencils. And what I find really interesting is that the theory that it was just a normal place built for pencil pushers ignores 2 things. One is that this bottomless pit actually exists there. And they just kind of forget about that entire part. And the other thing that's interesting to me is that someone decided it made the most sense when building this castle to build a chapel inside the castle that was directly over the bottomless pit. So they build this massive castle and say, like, let's put a house of God inside our castle.
All right.
And let's make sure it's directly on top of this bottomless pit. So they were basically, like, sealing it. The people that think that it's odd that this place was built where it was state that there's no water source nearby, which I've mentioned. I checked out the map, in fact. There's a lake that's 6 miles away, and there's a river, the Elbe River, that's just over 10 miles away. It's like 10.5 miles away. And the Elbe River is pretty substantial. It starts out in northwest Germany, where the North Sea meets the land, and it cuts through all of Germany before making its way into the Czech Republic, and it's about 10 miles away from this site in the Czech Republic. They don't really make mention of these 2 bodies of water nearby, but apparently the castles were typically built closer to bodies of water. I still don't think that this is terribly far away, though.
I mean, they don't have cars, so technically it is very, very far away.
They have people that they can send to fetch water, but that is a really long walk to go get some water, so what's really interesting is that this isn't the first structure that was built here. There is archaeological evidence that Celtic nomads actually inhabited this area as far back as the 6th century, and they had built structures there as far back as the 9th century that were apparently used for rituals. The castle that was built later, it was built in like the same spot that these rituals were performed prior to the sinkhole forming in this spot where all these weird rituals were happening. And it's built in the latter part of the 13th century, which means that it's built in the Gothic style. So this castle still exists.
And it's creepy as fuck?
It's creepy as fuck.
Oh, God.
The decor basically totally matches the location and the legend. And it's said to be one of the best preserved castles of that time period in the entire world.
It's because it's protected by black magic.
I don't know if it's black magic. It's just, I think at this point I would like to wildly speculate that it has been regularly upkept to maintain its structural integrity
by demons,
along with whatever magics were baked into the structure to keep the evil at bay. They didn't build this thing to harness the dark energy. They built this thing supposedly to seal it. So think like the wall in Game of Thrones, if you've read the books. The ice itself has like ancient runes carved into it that keep the White Walkers and the dead from crossing it. It's not just the fact that it's a wall. The wall has like actual runes carved into it so that there's magic preventing it.
So the castle's built around this hole?
Yes, the chapel's literally built on top of it.
Okay.
And the castle was built first, and then the chapel was built inside the castle as like a lid on it.
All right.
Seriously though, this place is in the remote Czech Republic. Like, it could have very well fallen into disarray at any point in the last 800 years. Like, remember when I did the whole y'all remember that time period bit that I love to do?
Okay, yeah.
There's a reason I picked all the wars. It's because there's been quite a few of them over the last 800 years, including this area, and plenty of them have seen the destruction of countless castles and keeps. This one, though, is slightly weathered right now in 2020. It's slightly weathered, and if you gave the Property Brothers like 8 weeks with this place, it'll be the fanciest castle holding back the forces of evil you've ever seen. Like, open floor plan combined with runes to repel the Antichrist. Sign me up. I'll put a deposit down.
Oh my God.
So maybe it was just a place for pencil pushers, but it doesn't explain another thing that is widely believed to have happened. During the construction and even after its completion, it said that criminals who were guilty of severe crimes, including and especially those who were sentenced to death, were given 2 options: accept your normal sentence or go down the pit.
That's terrifying.
Because they wanted to know what was down the pit. So naturally, when the option was first offered, the first dude that had it offered to him was like, I'll take the pit. I don't want to die. So they tied a rope around him and told him, man, I wish we had walkie-talkies. Those won't be invented until 1937 by a Canadian dude named Donald Hings. And then they lowered him into the pit. So they're just lowering this guy down as like a retriever of information.
And well, then how do they know how much rope they're going to need?
They probably just got as much rope as they could find and started lowering him down there. They wanted to know 2 things. 1, how far down does it go? And 2, is there anything down there? Maybe water. Maybe treasure. Maybe demons.
Treasure.
So I imagine that scene in Ghostbusters 2 when they're lowering Ray down into the hole they dug in the road, except, again, there's no walkie-talkies in this particular scene. When he was lowered past the point of being able to see him, so basically he's in the darkness, he became frightened and he started to panic. As his descent deepened, he began to scream bloody murder.
Why didn't they give him like a torch?
Teddy bear?
Like a torch or something so you could see?
They just wanted to lower him down there and see how far it went. And plus, he is a criminal. I feel like this is also some form of punishment for him.
All right.
I'd like to remind you, he's a hardened criminal, and he's screaming like a frightened child at this point. So they managed to reel him in one piece, but he had changed slightly. His hair had gone all white, and his face had, quote, aged 30 years.
This is bullshit.
He was babbling nonsense,
There's
but what
no
could be
way.
made out is that in the darkness were the half-human, half-beast creatures that the folks of the surrounding area had claimed to have seen, said that they were down in the well in the darkness. The man was not returned to jail, and he was not executed. He was instead taken to a mental asylum and was deemed, quote, batshit crazy, not an actual quote. He died of unknown causes 2 days later.
It's really hard to believe that
it's a 700-year-old ghost story.
It's like the scene from Constantine in the beginning where the guy's hair turns like totally white because he looks at the demon,
yeah.
You know?
Lots of people have actually had parts of their hair or their entire hair turn white from traumatic events. It's not like it's
like Rogue?
Something that doesn't happen. Exactly. Like the real character Rogue from the hit movie X-Men. I hate you so much.
My life is just a bunch of pop culture references.
Pop culture references from 1999.
Fuck you.
It said that once the word of the criminal's demise spread throughout the countryside, most people just accepted their sentence after that, unless they were incredibly desperate, typically those who were sentenced to death.
That's how legends are born, where it's just, this happened once, it's really fucking weird, and everyone's just going to talk about it like, you know, this thing, it happened, and now they're just going to create this story around this one thing happening, even though it could have been...
There were other people who believed the same thing you believe, and they were also, you know, murderers or rapists or whatever, they were sentenced to death. So some people were like, I'll take the pit, I don't want to die. And others were lowered into the pit. Most of them came back insane. Some of them didn't come back at all. They just realized that the rope had gotten really light and pulled it back up, and they were gone. The pit had claimed them, basically.
That's terrifying.
So most of the folks that were just babbling nonsense when they came out also spoke of the creatures of darkness, and their brains were pretty much broken after that. Like I mentioned, after the pit claimed some of these human guinea pigs, those who occupied the castle began to hear inhuman howls and very human screams coming from the pit, mostly at night. It's said that to this day, a, quote, chorus of screams can be heard from underneath the floorboards.
Fuck up.
It's not shocking to find out that as time went on, this administration office, is what it was supposed to be billed as, or administration office of the damned, if we're being fair, wound up being abandoned multiple times, but it was still maintained. So even though there were people not living there, it was still upkept. They didn't want it to deteriorate, which happens to most places that are abandoned.
That's
scary. Which is why that seems kind of weird to me.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be abandoned for very long on account of the fact that it is, for the most part, kind of nice inside, and it's a really well-built castle, so people would occupy it. And according... Go ahead.
No. I've always wondered about castles on the inside, because when I imagine a castle, I imagine all the stone walls on the inside and stuff like that. There's no insulation, and...
I mean, obviously, as the time moves on, the things are updated. There's insulation put in there, and there's different types of floors, not just stone everywhere, so... it's very nice. I'm going to post some pictures on the Instagram of what the inside looks like. The outside is kind of haunting. And, of course, a picture of the pit. So, according to the official Houska Castle website, which you can go to, The castle itself was built with the typical defensive structures being focused inward rather than outward.
What?
Now, I'm not an architect or castle expert, but I'm going to go ahead and give them the benefit of the doubt because the castle does look a little bit odd. I don't know what it is about it, but that's what they say. They say the castle was constructed rather than as like having all the defensive structures point outwards, like they're wrapped around a specific focal point, which just happens to be the chapel. So there's also apparently corridors in the basement that have mysterious creatures and human skeletons buried within them that have been sealed off at this point. And they do state that the only entrance to the corridors was above the castle gate, which has been decommissioned. So there's no way to get into those corridors. So if you take a tour of this place and you find yourself lost and suddenly in a corridor, I would recommend getting out. They say that the strange creature skeletons they found in there were the creatures that escaped from the pit. And the reason they made it so difficult to get in is because they first made it difficult to get out. So these creatures would basically just be trapped in these corridors.
Wow.
So, pretty haunting. It's not shocking to find out that legend of this castle is actually pretty well known, despite the fact that I had never heard of it.
I've never heard of it either.
To the surrounding area for quite some time. I mean, it's a haunted castle built around a gateway to hell that's 800 years old. That legend has obviously been there for quite some time. And of course, people are going to have heard about it. And there was a group of people before us who were super into ghost stories, like way before the Spooky Friends. Those people also happen to be huge pieces of shit.
Are you talking about Ghost Adventures?
No, I'm of course talking about the Nazis.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
The Nazis, it's fairly well known that Hitler and his government officials were fascinated with the occult and alternative paths to power, in particular those that were supernatural or could just basically not be matched by humans. They were just obsessed with it. There's so many different topics that kind of all dance around this, and eventually we're just going to cover like Nazis and the occult and have like a 2 or 3 part series on it. But
that would be fucking cool.
Right? I've had a couple of links that I've bookmarked for a long time, and this totally could have wound up being a part of it. It's not shocking to find out that during World War II, the Nazi army, after invading the local territories around them, made Houska Castle a headquarters after taking the area.
What?
A castle in the middle of fucking nowhere, with no strategical advantage, not near any border, became a headquarters for the Nazi army during their occupation.
It's where they found the Tesseract.
I hate you so much. Clearly they knew about it, and they wanted something to do with it, and they stayed there. It's said that they performed bizarre rituals while they were there, horrific experiments on prisoners in the basement levels. It's said that they were trying to harness the powers of hell during these experiments. It's claimed that some of the skeletons that were discovered in the castle appear to have been recent and from this time, and are either victims of Nazi experiments or Nazis themselves, having unleashed something and then trapping them in the corridors. Another legend is that the Nazis used this site and its supposed power as a breeding farm.
What?
Women that were determined to be of, quote, acceptable blood were sent here to be, quote, serviced by the most able-bodied SS troops.
Gross.
This is where, essentially, they wanted to harness the energy of darkness to breed the master race. And again, who knows? Nazis were batshit crazy and incredibly evil people, so it's not shocking to hear that this is something that they could have potentially done.
Did you know they also are thought to have created the first blow-up dolls?
I did not know that, and that's really, really weird that you do know that. They made Volkswagens, too. Eventually, the castle, like the rest of the area, was liberated from Nazi rule. When World War II came to an end, the castle went unoccupied mostly until 1999, when it was reopened as a tourist location, which it still is to this day. Obviously, a place like this needs to be a spot for people to visit for funsies, because why not? There are supposedly reports that visitors have had problems with electrical equipment, including phones not working properly and cars not starting. And I gotta say, that is one of the most terrifying paranormal things you can have happen. Like, say you visit this place, you get freaked out, and you want to leave, and you can't use your phone to call someone for help or tell someone what's happening, and your car will not start. That's just absolutely terrifying. Like, your options are go back inside and deal with it, or wander out into the wilderness, into one of the nearby towns, which are not that nearby. This place is still, to this day, basically in the middle of nowhere. And people say that you can still see bizarre creatures roaming the woods at night. So if you're there and things get a little bit rough, you want to get the hell out of there before the sun sets. So in addition to that, several apparitions are said to be seen at Houska Castle. There is supposedly a Headless Horseman that is seen riding around the grounds at night.
I love Headless Horseman. Tales of Headless Horseman are just so cool to me.
And one apparently haunts these woods. There's said to be an apparition of an old lady who wanders the halls of the castle as well as the grounds, and a creature that is said to have escaped from the pit but can't go too far due to, like, the seal on the pit, I guess.
What?
The demonic creature is said to be part man, part frog, part dog. And I gotta say, when I was reading this, I was really hoping it would be a man-bear-pig, because it would explain where it came from. A shadowy figure in a black monk's hood that appears in and around the surrounding landscape is also seen at the castle. The figure supposedly has no face underneath if you can get close enough to see it, and always appears to be watching those who are visiting the castle.
That's creepy.
The figure is also said to watch closely those that stay the night. That's right, folks.
You can stay the night?
You can apparently stay the night at the castle.
Like, do they have rooms or...
So I looked this up to get an idea of how much it would be, but there is not much information on the website regarding how much it'll set you back or where you will sleep. There's a lot of rooms in the castle. I mean, it's a castle, but I think it needs to be like some form of special arrangement to stay there. The site is mainly for tours, which actually don't take place at night. They do no tours at night whatsoever. Hours are 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And
it's
that's
like once the sun is starting to go down, get out. Yeah.
Exactly. The days it's available to be toured are based off of the month. Most of the summer months, like May till September, I think, it's open every day except for Monday. And then they had April and October on their schedule. In April and October, I think it's only Saturday and Sunday that you can go. There's only 2 days of the week that you can actually go.
Huh.
So folks that stay the night are said to have terrible nightmares and visions while they're there. One of these dates back to 1836, when a poet whose name I forgot to write in my script actually stayed in the castle. He wrote his friend a letter describing his horrible nightmare, and apparently this letter actually exists.
Wow.
And documents what he dreamt. He dreamt that his soul was pulled out of him and then pulled down into the pit in the basement, where he felt himself falling into darkness endlessly until suddenly he was transported to the city of Prague, which is 30 miles away, except it looked different. It was 170 years in the future.
That's very specific.
He claimed that he was able to speak to a little girl, and when he asked the little girl where he was, she said Prague, and when he asked her what year it was, she said 2006.
What?
This little girl showed him, quote, a casket with moving images.
Her cell phone.
Which was, I don't think it was supposed to be a cell phone, I think it was supposed to be a television. Because it's like a big
casket.
wooden box with moving images.
Okay, gotcha.
And a bizarre structure in the distance that was super large and emanated light. And I guess the way he describes this structure and its surface makes it sound like it's this housing development built in 1990 in Prague that at night lights up with this specific color that he describes in his letter. And everyone thinks that it's basically he actually saw a vision of the future. But it's like, with a lot of things like Nostradamus, which we'll eventually cover, obviously, is like...
What is that?
You don't know what Nostradamus is?
Nope.
He's like this super famous prophet from a long time ago, and like a bunch of his prophecies wound up coming true, and a bunch of them were like general verbiage and descriptions of things that people will eventually associate. Like Jules Verne, like describing rocket ships way before they were ever built, but she said that they were going to be built out of like brick. There's a bunch of details that are like not super specific, and then eventually when they're true, people are like, oh my god, they said exactly this was going to happen, but
it's not really.
It's prophecy. They keep things general or vague. Just like Harry Potter, like he's born on July 30th. He's not the chosen one. It's Neville. He's born on July 31st. Everyone fucking knows that. I'm just saying. So.
Does July have 31st?
Yes, holy shit. This is the second time today I have told you, a grown-ass woman, that July has 31 days in it. Just learn the fucking knuckle trick. I've taught it to you a million times. I teach her the knuckle trick every fucking time we go through this, and she just doesn't pay any attention. So anyways, I'm not saying I think all of this is true. I want to tell you the story as it's supposed to be told. This is all probably nonsense, but it sounds pretty weird that there is this particular site that has a history of occupation dating back 1,500 years that weird shit happens at that eventually formed a apparently bottomless pit. So, the pit is definitely, to me, the most interesting part of this legend. Folks that visit the site and are there after sunset still claim to hear the sound of claws scratching at the floorboards, if they're especially over the location of the chapel.
Wow.
The last thing I will say on this topic is this. If there is anything I'm the most skeptical on, it's the pit not having a bottom. it has to have a bottom, you know? Or it has to come out on the other side of the fucking planet.
Yeah.
And have someone in the other hemisphere just grab the string or whatever you dipped through the core of the Earth. They're like, hello. It's just, there has to be something. So there are ways to measure this besides tying a person to a rope. And I think we could do something like that. And I do mean we. So I vote we go.
No.
2.5K patron goal. 2,500 patrons. We're going to go. There, I said it. Houska Castle. You're welcome, folks.
It's like that movie As Above, So Below, where they go so far down
It
that
flips.
it flips, and
Right.
they come back up again. So maybe it's something like that.
It flips when they get to hell, just FYI, if you don't remember the movie.
So are they in hell when they exit the manhole?
No, they're leaving hell when they exit the manhole.
Gotcha.
That's why they're upside down. So there you go. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen As Above, So Below.
It's old, okay?
It's not that old. It's like maybe 10 years old.
10 years old.
All right, so that is the first topic of this episode. Before we move into Robin's topic, we are going to take a quick commercial break.
And welcome back, everybody, to the episode. It's my turn. We're going to cover my stuff. And today is probably going to be a rough one to end on because it's a little more intense. It's not as cool as a haunted castle with demons.
As cool as a haunted castle with demons.
So put your true crime caps on because that's the direction we're going. I was trying to steer away from saying strapped on.
We should probably make caps that just say paranormal and true crime. That way people could actually wear them during episodes.
That would be cute.
And we can tell people which caps to wear.
Oh, my sweet jeez.
There you go. Your new product. Also, check out our store right now or go to any of our social medias to see the new products Robin has put up. She put our Mothman design on a bunch of stuff, and she also put the Nessie design on a bunch of stuff, and I am so excited to order all the things, and I hope you are too. Shout out. It's my favorite design she's ever made is the Nessie design. It looks amazing. So
thank you. That's
You're
very
welcome.
sweet of you. All right, so I bet a lot of you guys have heard the phrase angel of death before, and these are those that we trust our lives with and our well-being with, and we
Angels of death? We trust our lives to angels of
No,
death?
but they're just because they're health professionals, so you trust them with your life, and you hope that they're there to fix your health issues and get you through times when you're in the hospital or doctor's offices or whatever. Unfortunately, some of those health professionals are bad egos. And
I like how proud you were of bad egos, like you were waiting for acknowledgement from
I wasn't waiting for acknowledgement. I thought you were going to be like, that's fucking stupid.
I'm like, okay, they're bad egos.
Oh my god.
You should Lego of them.
Oh
I'm sure
my
that's
God.
what you were hoping for.
No, because people say bad eggs. I say bad egos.
Gotcha. Robin's unique and special, everyone.
Fuck you. Okay, so they take advantage of their roles as caregivers and use it to fulfill their sick need to kill. And it's unfortunate, but it happens. This first one that I'm going to cover this episode is Donald Harvey. And I'm probably going to cover a whole bunch of other Angels of Death as, time goes on. Because
You were saying you might only cover one this episode. So.
Yeah, I'm only covering one this episode.
So you said the first one you're going to cover is the
In
only
the
one
whole
you're covering.
series
I got
of-
you. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Of the Angel of Death series.
Yeah, because there's a whole bunch out there, and you'd be surprised by how many there are. It's crazy. So, Donald Harvey. This... Can we trust him?
Wow. Harvey Dent. Can we trust him?
So, okay. So this serial killer has been known as the Angel of Death and has admitted to having killed 36 hospital patients in both Ohio and Kentucky. He's actually admitted to killing a lot more, but that's what he has been charged with. 36.
That's crazy because sometimes they're just like, the evidence is circumstantial. Even though we have a confession, we're not going to charge him with something we won't be 100% sure he'll get convicted of. So they just wind up not charging people with murders that they are like, oh yeah, I committed that shit.
Just watch. So.
Just watch? What am I watching?
Or listen. Okay. Though he's claimed to have killed many more people than that, it's just the 36 that he was charged with. According to Harvey, his killing was purely out of a sense of empathy for the suffering of those that were terminally ill. And, he also said that many were because he was angry at them.
Okay. And I was going to say, so is he like a euthanizer? No. This dude's just a monster. Gotcha.
Yeah. So there's really not an excuse or reasoning behind his actions. He's just kind of this horrible, horrible person. So he used a lot of different methods to kill his victims. There were injections of arsenic, cyanide, insulin, morphine, other poisons like that. He even gave patients fluids that were laced with hepatitis B and HIV. He even suffocated individuals and turned off their ventilators. This guy was fucked up. He was just super twisted. He even poisoned a bunch of people's food. He was just weird.
It's a lot of different methods to kill people.
Yeah. So though he claimed to have begun killing in order to ease the pain of dying patients, he kept a detailed diary that came across as one that would belong to a sadistic, cold-hearted killer. I'm sure he put different ways he would kill people in it and stuff like that. Harvey was born in Butler County, Ohio in 1952. So what is that, 70 some odd years ago? 70 years ago. So, oh my God, is that more than that? No. I don't know math.
It's 68 years ago.
Thank you. Teachers seemed to like him, but his classmates recall...
She nailed 2 + 2 earlier, though, folks. She fucking crushed that one.
Oh, shut up. Okay. So teachers... Shit. No. So teachers seemed to like him, but his classmates recall him being unapproachable and pretty isolated, kept to himself. He'd much rather spend time with the teachers than go outside and play in the playground. Supposedly, from the time that he was 4 and for several years afterwards, Harvey was sexually abused by his uncle and an older male neighbor. And not that gives him the right to kill people, but that would fuck someone up pretty good.
Right.
It's just something that
is very common in the serial killer history is sexual abuse of some like physical violent abuse as well. Something you see really commonly.
It just messes you up, you know? And especially when you're 4. Come on, that's so young.
So young.
So he dropped out of school in 9th grade, not because he couldn't hack it or just couldn't pass. It's just because he was smart and found it boring. So he dropped out of school, got his GED at 17. In 1970, he went to help care for his sick grandfather. So he's 18, goes to help take care of his grandpa at the Marymount Hospital in London, Kentucky. And it sounded super fancy when I saw London. I was like, what? No. Kentucky. So he saw, that's not fancy.
I was going to say, what are you saying about London, Kentucky?
I just have never been to Kentucky. I think it'd be really cool to see. There's lots of stuff.
I've mainly only been to Louisville. I've driven through a lot of Kentucky, but I've stayed in Louisville.
I want to go to the baseball factory. Baseball bat factory. Yeah. Okay, anyway, so he saw, when he went there to take care of his grandpa, he kind of saw how the hospital worked, things like that, and started working there as an orderly. And he was given a position in which he could spend time alone with patients. And this was supposedly where his killings began. So he's 18, working at this hospital. Supposedly he killed at least a dozen patients within the 10 months that he worked there at the hospital.
God, man.
The first of which was an 88-year-old man named Logan Evans. He smothered him on May 30th, 1970, with a pillow and a sheet of blue plastic. He got rid of all the evidence, changed the patient's gown into something totally clean. It was like, oh, he died, hey. At 18, your first murder, and you're already knowing how to clean up your crime scene type shit.
He's probably been plotting it for a while, if that's the case.
Yeah. Another one was Danny George, and he was only 12.
That's fucking awful, dude.
So this guy just is such a messed up person. And this position of him being an orderly, spending alone time with all these patients, it kind of was like giving him a feeling of ultimate control over a person's life, And so he could kind of do whatever he wanted because they just left him. Throughout his career, he worked as an orderly and an autopsy assistant. He had a whole bunch of different jobs. Back in the day, orderlies weren't necessarily watched as closely with the background checks and things like that, like they are now, or that you would hope that they are now.
Right.
Because he just asked the hospital, hey, can I work here? And they're like, oh yeah, here's a job. Which I think is crazy, because that's super scary that you're trusting these people's lives to this kid that just came in. Harvey's personal life was a bit of a mess. He suffered from depression, often contemplating suicide. He did have a couple relationships. He dated a James Peluso on and off for about 15 years. He eventually killed him when he was too sick to care for himself. He was also supposedly involved with a Vernon Midden, who was a married man with children that worked as an undertaker. Apparently, Midden would often talk to Harvey about how bodies reacted differently to different types of trauma. So it kind of gave him ideas, like, on new ways to kill, you know? Midden also introduced Harvey to the occult. So it was like a step in the weird direction for him, because he already had these ideas of killing people, and then you're introducing the occult aspect of it. It's just very strange.
This guy is like a ticking time bomb at this point with all this new information he's acquiring and all these wonderful friends he's making.
Yep. So his desire to kill did escalate. He didn't take action on just helpless hospital patients. At one point, he suspected that his lover and roommate, a Carl Howler, was having an affair, so he started to poison his food with arsenic and made him too sick to leave their apartment, which is total creeper status. He also killed Howler's dad with arsenic after an argument that they had on April 25th, 1983. He argued with Carl's parents, and so he's just like, fuck you guys, poisoned the dad. 4 days after the initial poisoning, Carl's father suffered a stroke, went into the hospital. On the night that he died, Harvey had come into the hospital to visit him and gave him arsenic-tainted pudding. How you let someone bring that shit into the hospital is beyond me.
I mean, he brought him pudding. He was an orderly. He probably knew something that he was allowed to eat. And he was like, oh, I'm bringing you this wonderful treat, even though we argued 4 days ago.
Yeah.
And then you wound up in the hospital.
He did try to kill Carl's mom as well, but was unsuccessful in his attempts to kill his mom. Harvey also poisoned 2 of his neighbors. He put a hepatitis serum in Diane Alexander's drink, and then he killed Helen Metzger by putting arsenic in a pie. Poor Helen was just seen as a threat to his and Carl's relationship, and that's why he killed her.
Wow. He was just murdering everyone around him. Like,
yeah.
Why did it take so... Like, you said this started in 1970. This is 1983 now. How does it take so long for people to catch on? Like, everyone's dying of poisoning around this one guy.
It's just so crazy that no one put 2 and 2 together to equal 4.
That's 4, by the way.
I'm all for being jealous when you need to be, but, like, this is some stalker stuff. That's just, you see a neighbor and you're like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? Because they're friends, you know, the boyfriend or whatever and her are friends, and so he's like, no, that you're taking him away from me, I'm gonna kill you. It's just too much. He even tried to kill his ex-boyfriend, Doug Hill, by putting arsenic in his food as well.
This guy loves arsenic.
In January of 1984, Carl was like, get the fuck out, you crazy bitch. Kicked him out of the house. And so Harvey tried to poison him several times, but was unsuccessful with killing him.
Was he like, here's some pudding? I'm sorry.
It makes me really wonder how this guy got all that arsenic so
that's a
easily.
good point. Where the fuck is he getting arsenic from?
Because this whole time, over all these years, he's like, let me sprinkle a little bit of it here. Let me sprinkle a little of it there.
He's arsenic bay.
Yeah.
He's just walking around.
He's like, just a little extra flavor.
Just a little bit to make it taste like Starbucks. That's my mom's catchphrase when making coffee, by the way.
It's just crazy how much arsenic this guy had. I just can't imagine it's that easy to get. But who knows? I don't know. Maybe times have changed and it's harder now.
I'm afraid one of the spooky friends is going to be like, dude, arsenic is so easy to get.
Oh, God.
It's going to freak me out.
Anyway, anyone who pissed this guy off or crossed him in any way better have watched their backs, because this guy was just ruthless. He just killed anybody that pissed him off. And that's just scary that there are people out there that are like that. He was arrested on March 31st, 1971. It was his last day at Marymount Hospital, so that first hospital he worked at.
Right.
He was arrested for burglary, and while being incredibly drunk, confessed to being a murderer.
What the fuck?
And this is 1971.
I was going to say, why does he get let out at some point?
Nothing turned up in terms of evidence, so he just went on to continue murdering people. They just let him go. He had a stint in his life where he wanted to be in the military, so he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. He was sent home with an honorable discharge for medical reasons after 2 failed suicide attempts. When he got home, he tried it again. And so he checked himself into the VA hospital to get treatment. There, he underwent 21 electroshock treatments.
Wow.
And was released after 90 days. And who knows what those electroshock treatments did to him, you know? Because that does not leave your brain feeling pretty good, you know?
Well, they say they're starting to use them again in, like, more modern medicine to, like, reset certain things. I haven't looked too far into, like, what they're using it for nowadays.
Well, I know they have certain ones where they cut your brain open and they put little paddles inside your brain and do a little tiny...
It's just some Frankenstein shit.
Anyway, so... After Marymount, that first hospital he worked at, he went on to work part-time at Cardinal Hill Convalescent Hospital in Lexington, Kentucky, where he did clerical work. He worked there for 2.5 years, and according to Harvey, he was able to control his urge to kill that entire time in that period of his life. September 1975, he moves back to Cincinnati, where he got a job at the VA hospital and worked there overnight. And it's thought that he killed at least 15 patients using cyanide and rat poisoning in their food there.
So I guess he lost control.
Yep. Between 1984 and 1985, it's thought that he killed at least 4 others outside of the hospital setting. And then March 1985, Harvey got a job as a morgue supervisor.
So they're already dead at that point.
Yeah. He then lost that job months later in July when security guards found a gun in his gym bag. He was simply fined and then made to resign, and the incident wasn't even documented.
Wow.
It's just, there were so many things that happened in this guy's life that you should have seen and been like, he's a fucking killer.
Red
There's
flag,
something
red
wrong
flag,
with
red
him.
flag.
Oh my God. So after that, he got a job at the Cincinnati Drake Memorial Hospital. February 1986, nurse's aide. That's what he does there. He went right back to his old habits of killing people. So in March of 1987, a year later, he finally gets his comeuppance. John Powell, a patient on life support for months after having suffered a motorcycle accident, dies abruptly. During his autopsy, they find large amounts of cyanide in his system. The forensic pathologist that conducted the autopsy claimed to have smelled bitter almonds, which matches the smell of cyanide, while he was doing the autopsy. And he was just like, there's something wrong with this. There's foul play here. So they send a sample to 3 different labs to get tested to confirm for sure that there's cyanide in this person. It's confirmed. Investigators then do a bunch of interviews. Harvey says that he can't make it into the interview.
Wow.
Investigators then keep doing their job investigating and lead to Harvey after finding out that he has been forced to resign from that VA hospital after being caught stealing body parts for occult rituals and things like that.
That's so fucked up.
When questioned, Harvey simply confessed to having, quote-unquote, euthanized Powell with cyanide. How you can just straight up be like, nah, I just euthanized him, no big deal. That's fucked up, dude.
With cyanide.
Apparently, that same day that he killed Powell, he'd also killed 82-year-old Hilda Leitz by giving her Dedacol. It's this material, this liquid that is an adhesive remover. He put it in her orange juice. It's like Goo Gone, but specifically made to take off the sticky residue of like medical tape and things like that. That's just fucked up. Okay.
Yeah, that's super fucked up.
Pat Minarkin, who I don't think that's actually how you spell his pronounce his last name. He was an anchor at WCPO TV in Cincinnati at the time. He decided to look into Harvey's history after all this stuff pops off that he killed this dude. He was suspicious of someone who'd been working as a healthcare worker for so long to only kill someone as a quote-unquote one-off. Just, it didn't make sense to him.
Right. It's especially how he explains it, like, oh, I just euthanized them. Like,
yeah.
That casually, like, oh, so that's a common thing for you where it's not something you're feeling any guilt or remorse over.
It's a totally understandable suspicion to have because, like, you've been here. You guys have heard all that other stuff. There's no way he didn't kill other people.
Right.
Apparently, for several months prior to Powell's death, nurses at Drake Memorial Hospital had noticed a spike in deaths, and when nurses brought this to the attention of administrators, they had been ordered to keep quiet. Why that is, I don't know. But those that were concerned that Harvey would be acquitted went to Pat, claiming to have evidence that Harvey killed at least 10 others. Over the next few months, Pat did some deep diving, did his news reporter stuff, journalism things. He brought together a bunch of evidence that he could then report in a 30-minute special segment that linked Harvey to at least 24 murders in the span of 4 years.
Wow. That's
a lot of killing in 4 years. When Harvey's lawyer, Bill Whalen, asked him if he'd killed anyone else, Harvey answered with an estimate. An estimate. He didn't even have an exact number because he was just killing people willy-nilly. He estimated that he had killed 70 people.
Holy shit.
In order to escape the death penalty, Harvey was offered life imprisonment if he confessed to all the murders. So all 24 were linked to Harvey. August of 1987, Harvey pleads guilty to 24 counts of first-degree murder. He's sentenced to 3 concurrent life sentences, and I think concurrent means all at once. So what's interesting about having concurrent sentences is that if one sentence goes away, like with an appeal or something like that, there's still others that stay in place, that can stay in place and keep you in jail.
Right.
Which I didn't know.
3 is very low for having killed 24 people, though.
Yeah, I wonder if they were just being lenient or what. I don't know why they would let it be concurrent, but that's what happened. In November that same year, Harvey also pleads guilty to another 9 murders in Laurel County, Kentucky at the Marymount Hospital from the 1970s. From these, he's sentenced to life plus 20 years to be served concurrently with the Ohio sentence too. This guy wasn't going to get out of jail until 2040-something. 43, something like that. 2040-something.
He would be 90, though. You said he was born in 1950, right?
1952, yeah.
Yeah, he'd be 90-something, so it's possible this fucking dude could get out at some point.
Well, we'll get there. In total, he pled guilty to 37 murders, but confessed to a whole lot more, obviously. Though Harvey was, or has admitted to quite a few murders, the full extent of his actions are probably never, ever, ever going to be known, because how do you check for that, you know? It's been undetected for so long, and no one ever thought about it because these patients weren't expected to survive their illnesses or ailments or anything that was wrong with them. Like, Powell suffered that motorcycle accident, then was on life support for months. So they really didn't expect these people to survive. In interviews, Harvey places the blame of his actions on doctors, hospitals, and even his own friends, because his reasoning is doctors often never saw patients after they'd been pronounced dead. Hospitals allowed him to continue treating patients that angered him.
Wow.
And friends tried to mess up his life.
Wow.
This guy was such a little fucking bitch, okay?
It's basically like any reason I did something was someone else's fault and not mine for doing it.
He just never seemed to have any remorse for his actions whatsoever. On March 28th, 2017, Harvey had been severely beaten and found in his cell. He died 2 days later, with fellow inmate James Elliott being the one blamed for his death and charged with aggravated murder. So he's dead now.
It's a nice little ending to that.
Yeah.
He's a monster.
Yeah, he's gone. He got beaten up in jail.
Got beaten to death.
Yep.
In jail. In 2017, so he would have been 65.
Yep.
He'd been 65 years old. So someone beat a 65-year-old man to death who just so happened to also be a total monster, and I can't say I'm terribly sad about it.
I'm not sad about it, but yeah, I'm not sad about it. I wouldn't ever wish death on anybody, but fuck that guy.
Yeah, that guy's a fucking terrible, terrible human being, and the fact that he doesn't show any remorse and still blames other people, like, it's my friend's fault, I killed them for trying to fuck with my life. Like,
yeah.
My lifestyle is obviously to murder, and they wanted to stop that, so then they were murdered. It's on them. It's just bizarre. Like, I don't understand the mindset of a psychopath or a sociopath, so it's, I don't know, kind of despicable to hear people like this, but at the same time, it's also tremendously fascinating and morbid.
It's definitely fascinating because there are multiple people out there that are like this, and it makes you really wonder what makes them tick.
Yeah, it's a weird way to put it. It's like they're in a science experiment, but right on. Good stuff, Robin. Way to bring us an Angel of Death, and I'm guessing this is the first part of a multi-part series. Probably not in a row.
No, not in a row.
Yeah, but there'll be more Angels of Death in the future, so I think that's everything we have for episode 138. If anyone has a story out there, it does not have to be related to Bottomless Pits or Angels of Death, please feel free to reach out to us. You can email storytime@scaryish.com or go to our website, scaryish.com, and click on Contact Us. Fill out that form. It comes directly to us. You can also message us on any of our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scariyishpodcast. Twitter is @scariyishpod. And Instagram is @scariyishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scariyishpodcast. Those are monthly donations. There's a whole bunch of different tiers. Right now, if you sign up for Badge of Honor tier and above, I have a few Mothman acrylic charms left. So get them while you can, because that's it. What is the other thing? Coffee. You can go to ko-fi.com/scaryish podcast. Those are one-time donations. All your donations go to helping us upgrade our studio setup, keep this podcast going, allow us to create cool stuff like acrylic charms for patrons, and allow me to have time to make cool new merch like the cryptid stuff that I'm going to be putting out. And yeah, thanks to you guys, we can keep doing this.
Indeed. We appreciate all of the support we get, not just monetarily, but people who just listen to the show, share the show, watch us live, all that stuff. It means the world to us. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts for that. And yeah, I think that's just about everything. So Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.